Hi there everybody and welcome back to another video. Have you guys been searching for that something on the internet that will take your black and white images to a whole new level, but your editing skills are just basic adjustments of the sliders left or right? Well, the good news is there's a simple way to transform those black and white images into something truly stunning. And I'm gonna show you how. So go grab yourself a cup of coffee, relax, and let's begin.
Hi there all photographers and non-photographers. Today I traveled to the sister island of Malta called Gozo. Behind me you can see this large rock here. It's called Fungus Rock, and I'll be taking a couple of black and white shots in long exposure. We'll be heading back to the studio when I return to Malta, and we'll be editing these shots together into black and white. I'm using the Fujifilm X-T4, all set up with filters, a 10-stop and a 6-stop, and a circular polarizer. This is the shot we'll be taking. It's going to be something like this. And I'll be showing you how to turn this image into an amazing piece of art.
Well, here we are back in the studio, guys. I've spent a couple of days on the small island of Gozo, and this is the image I took, and it was a long exposure of only 13 seconds since the sea was already quite calm. It's a moody shot, not much color, but we'll still be turning it into black and white. And the first thing I'm gonna start off with in this image is go up to the profile and switch it over to Adobe Landscape. Here you increase some more color in the scene, and don't forget, as I mentioned in my previous videos, when turning your images from color to black and white, always increase the saturation and vibrance as much as you can. Just don't overdo it. So I'm gonna go down to the calibration, and that's what we'll be doing. I'll be raising the blue primary saturation to around 75. And then I'm gonna go over to the effects panel, increase a bit of texture and increase a touch of clarity, a bit of dehaze, and then I'm gonna head over to the exposure panel. You can start off with the exposure panel if you want. Also, I'm in Adobe Camera Raw. You can use Lightroom if you prefer it. It's still the same sliders and software, but I prefer Adobe Camera Raw as I find it much easier to go into Photoshop and then back out again. Now I'm going to reduce the highlights to get more detail in the sky, increase the shadows, not too much. Again, check your whites for clippings, raise it, move it to the right. As soon as you see clippings, dial it down. Do the same for the blacks, dial it back down, and we're gonna reduce a bit of exposure to balance out the histogram. Remove the clippings, and I'm gonna leave the contrast how it is. From here I'm gonna go down to the detail. I reduce the radius and I increase the detail to around 85. Hold down your masking Alt key if you're using a PC or Windows, and raise it until you see whites where you want the sharpening to be. That should be good. And now we're going to go into Photoshop and turn it into black and white. You don't have to turn it into a smart object. We won't be doing that. So now we're in Photoshop. I'm going to go down to the adjustment layer on this black and white circle. And like before, click on black and white. There we are in black and white. If you want, you can press auto. I prefer to leave it how it was. I close this, and like before, I go down and press on the gradient map. Click on classic, and I think I'll leave it how it is. If you need some adjustments, just click on this gradient map here. I'm going to show you, and raise your whites or highlights if you need to increase them. If not, just go back down. If you want to increase the blacks, just move it to the right and you get more blacks in your blacks. I'm going to leave it how it is since the sea is already dark enough. And here I'm going to close it. I always flatten the image, and I'm going to take it over to Adobe Camera Raw again, or if you're using Lightroom, back to Lightroom. And now I'm going to play around with the exposure panel again. That's the benefit of not using a smart object, as they all are set to 0 again. Use the highlights again, where you get much more detail in the sky and in the clouds. Again, increase the shadows. Again, the whites for clippings, the blacks, and I'm going to reduce the exposure just about there. Next, I'm going to go over to the masking. I'm going to hit the linear gradient, and I'm going to cover nearly all of the sky. I've selected these rocks here, so what I'm going to do is press on these 3 dots and intersect mask with sky. And here the mask is going to be removed from these rocks. And there we have it. Do not just use the selective, just not use the sky mask, as it will completely cover the sky with no gradient. That's why I always use a gradient. And here I'm going to reduce the exposure. I'm going to try and reduce the highlights and see what happens. It will work. I'm going to use another linear gradient, but just cover a bit of the top. Reduce the exposure. That should be okay. Now I'm going to do the same for the foreground, a linear gradient, but now I'm going to do just one mask, and I'm going to cover just a part of the rocks on the right hand side, since the sea is already quite dark. I used a polarizing filter, so clear polarizer, and you can see just beneath the sea these rocks under the surface. Use the exposure, not much, to around there. I'm going to go out a bit. If you want to see your before and after just on the masking, go on the mask, click the eyeball. That's without the mask, and this is with the mask. I'm going to do some more masking, and I'm going to use the radial gradient, and I'll be placing it over the whiter part of the sky here. I'm going to open it up, and here I'm going to increase the exposure. I can increase it, open it up a bit more. I'm going to increase the highlights, and I'm going to increase the whites. That should do it. Now I'm going to use another radial gradient, and now you're going to see with these few masks we'll be turning this image into a perfect black and white photograph. Increase the exposure. I always place my masking over the brighter parts on the image. I'm going to leave it how it is, but now I'm going to reduce, subtract the mask from these rocks. Just press subtract and use the brush to mask away on the rocks. That should be okay. And here I'm going to increase the exposure. Just subtle movements on the sliders. I'm going to do one more radial gradient, and I think I'm going to do it around here. Increase the exposure, and I think I'll just do one more, and I'll be placing it here. It seems a bit brighter here, not too much, and just subtle movements. Next I'm going to use the brush this time, and I'm gonna paint on the brighter part of the rocks here. I'm gonna reduce the brush size over here as well, and over on this side as well. If you've gone into the sea, just use the subtract like I've done. And here I'm going to increase the exposure just a touch. I'm going to use a brush again, and we're doing practically dodging and burning. Now I'm going to go over the darker parts of the image. Don't forget the light source, it's coming from here, covering just where I think it will be darker. Again, I'm going to subtract. You can increase the image size to get more precise with the brush, but for the sake of the video, I'll leave it how it is so you can see what I'm doing. I'm going to decrease the exposure here. It should be okay. Here I'm going to go before and after without the mask, and with the masking. I'm going to use another radial gradient, and I'm going to place it over the brightest part of the sky, which is here, to make a natural vignette. Turn it just a bit. I think I'll close it. Invert your mask. We can afford to open it up a bit and reduce the exposure, and that should be okay. Now I'm going to see the before and after. Before, watch the difference with masking, and the after. Let me remove the last mask I done, and I'll show you the before and after. This is with the masking, and this is without the masking. You can see the incredible transformation just by using a few masks. You need a lot of patience, but the results will be huge. So there we have our final image. I always reduce it to see it much better. I hope you liked the video, guys, and learned something about your black and white images. You can get your old photos, images, and give them a try with this masking, and you'll see how very effective it is. Thank you guys, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in another video.